In lesson 2, we're going to talk about surface area of rectangular prisms. So first we're going to define what is surface area. So surface area is the total area of the surface of a three-dimensional object. So we know with three-dimensional objects, we have multiple surfaces. So we could find each surface and then we're going to add them together. So for this, what I like to do with a rectangular prism is I like to call the front and back two of the surfaces, the top and bottom two of the surfaces, and the left and the right. So for this, I'm going to highlight the measurements I'm using for my front and my back. So I'm going to call this side the front and back. Remember, the front and the back are the same shape, so I can see that its measurements are 9 times 7. So I'm finding area, so I'm doing base times height, so 9 times 7 is 63. And since there are two of them, I know that the total surface area for those two sides is 126. For the top and the bottom, in purple, I can see those measurements are 7 times 8, which is 56. And 56 times 2 is 112. And then lastly, you have your left and your right. So I'm highlighting that in pink. You can see that you kind of have to transfer around this 9 so that you know this is 8 times 9, which is 72. And there are two identical shapes, so that's 144. So how do you find the total surface area? You add up your 6 surface areas that you found by base times height times 2. And so for this total surface area, I label it SA for surface area, is 382 feet squared. Looking at a cube, cubes are a little easier because we know that all 6 faces on a cube are identical. So if I know the area of one face, which is 4 times 4, and there are 6 of them because cubes are all identical sides or faces, I can just take that area times 6, and that gives me the total surface area for that cube. So in this instance, 96 centimeters squared. All right, I'm going to go to this word problem next, which might require you to have to draw a picture. So a rectangular storage box is 2 feet by 1 foot. So I'm going to draw my box and label it 2 by 1. And it's also 4 feet high. I'm actually going to move this up and move where my label goes. And so when I draw three-dimensional figures, whoops, I kind of have to give it some dimension. So these would be, I'm going to start again. I'm actually going to draw my height of 4 with my 2 feet long, and then I'm going to angle this part with the 1 back. There we go. So when I do this, I still have, just like that previous example, front and back, top and bottom, left and right. And so in this shape, my front shape is 4 by 2, which is 8, and there are 2 of them, which makes 16. My top and bottom shapes are this skinny little rectangle at the top, and I can see with my measurements that's 1 by 2. There are 2, so I have a total of 4. And then my side shape, I have to do a little bit of transferring measurements. I know this is 1 and this is 4, so that's 1 by 4. And there are 2 of those, so that's a total of 8. To get my total surface area, I add all those up, and I get 28, that was feet squared, because we're still doing area. All right, so I have 2 more rectangular prisms. If you want to get some practice, you could always pause my video and then come back to it, but I'm going to go ahead and go forward with these rectangular prisms, labeling my front and back, my top and bottom, my left and my right. So my front shape, putting an orange here, and I can see that's 25 by 31. So 25 times 31 is a pretty big number, 775. Remember, there's 1 in the back, so it's identical. So we're going to multiply that by 2 and get 1550. And then I have my top of my prism. I have to transfer this 31 up, so I can see that's 10 by 31, which is 310. Remember, there are 2 of those shapes, one on the bottom, 1 on the top, so that's 620. And then I have my left and my right. I have to transfer some measurements again. I know this is 10. That 25 squeezes over, and that's 25. So I have 10 by 25 for that, which is 250. Again, there's that hidden shape in the back. So we multiply by 2 to get 500. And then we add all of our surface areas together for all 6 faces to get our total surface area of 2,670. And then this was meters squared. Repeating this process again, we're going to use that front, right, front, back, top, bottom, left, right. Those are just and signs in between. The highlight tool really helps me to differentiate the shapes. Now, if you're doing these and your shapes aren't the same as mine, that's okay. So I'm going to call this one the front. That's 20 times 18, which is 360. Identical shape in the back, so we multiply it by 2 to give us 720. My top of my prism, have to transfer over those measurements, so that 18 comes up, that 30 comes up from the bottom, so 18 times 30 equals 540. There's an identical shape on the bottom, so I multiply by 2, get 1080. And then I have my left, right boxes to go from, transferring that 20 over, so I get 20 times 30, which is 600. One on that opposite side you can't really see, so that's 1200 total. And then I'm going to add up all my surface areas from those 6 faces. Very repetitive process. I get surface area equals 3,000 meters squared. So there's all my examples with cubes and rectangular prisms. Kind of moving down here, what shape is pictured below? This is a rectangular prism, and if you notice, it has some fractions. We can change fractions to decimals, so if you'd want to do that, you can, and make this 7.5 and 2.5, and you're going to repeat that same process. So front, back, top, bottom, left, right. So my front of my shape is 7.5 by 2.5 because that measurement kind of scoots over from here. Multiply those together, you get 18.75. Don't forget to multiply that by 2 because there's 2 identical rectangles of that measure to get 37.5. Then I have the top of my shape. Measurements, we kind of have to scoot up from the bottom to get 7.5 by 4. And when I multiply 7.5 by 4, I get 37.5. Have to take it by 2 to get 75 total for the top and bottom area. And then I have my faces on the left and right, which are 4 by 2.5. Those measurements are already there. So 2.5 times 4 is 10. There are 2 identical shapes, so that's 20. Remember, you're adding up all the surface area from all 6 shapes. So nothing really changed about this process. We're just getting a decimal number, and if it asks for it in fraction form, you want to write that in fraction form. It also asks you to draw the net of this, including the dimensions. So when you do that, you want to be really careful that you're plotting out the rectangles appropriately. So you know you have a large rectangle. You know you have a skinny one in between from looking at the 3D figure, which allows you to have a second large rectangle, because remember, you have faces that are identical. And then you have those on the side. And it does ask you to add in those measurements. So you want to kind of look closely. You know that that top and bottom rectangle, those bigger ones, are 7.5 by 4. You know those skinny ones in between, if you're kind of going around the middle of the shape, are 7.5 by 2.5. So that's that one. And then those ones on the side are 4 by 2.5. And I already have one on that side, so I'm going to add it over there. All right, so remember, when you're finding surface area, you're finding the total area of the entire shape. These are going to take a little bit more application, but I want you to try those out, and then I'm going to go through those. All right, so if we're looking at this, we know we have a rectangular base on the bottom. So let's start there. So we have area equals base times height. We can see that the base and height of that rectangle is 4 by 12. So 4 times 12 is 48. But there are 3 identical shapes like that. So we're going to take that singular area and multiply it by 3 to get the total area kind of going around the center of the shape. Then we also have to find the surface area of these triangles. Using what we know about triangles, area equals 1/2 base times height. So we have a base of 4 because it's what it sits on the bottom. And then over here, it tells us the height is 6 centimeters. So 1/2 of 24 is 12. But keep in mind you have 2 triangles, so you have to multiply that by 2 to get 24. You're going to take these 2 measures and put them together. So your total surface area is 168 centimeters squared. If you need to watch that again, just go back and watch the video. So now we're going to move on to this trapezoidal prism. So we're obviously going to have to break down into several shapes. So we're going to start with, why not, the trapezoids. So with the trapezoids, we're talking about this shape and this shape. So area equals 1/2 of the height, B1 plus B2. So it's tricky. This little 2 is its height right in here. So 1/2 of 2, and then we got to look at the bases. So the base on one is 10, and the base on the other is 4. So we have 1/2 of 2. Let's just go ahead and skip that step and go, that's 1, plus 14. So one of the trapezoids is 14 centimeters squared. But by looking at the picture, I know I have 2. So there's just the orange parts that I highlighted. I can see the total base, so this big, large rectangle I'm drawing out in purple. So I have area equals base times height. So I have to kind of look around for those measurements, and I can see that they are 10 and 7. So 10 times 7 gives us 70, and that's only one of those. So that's my final spot or answer for that. But I do need to, and I'm going to kind of erase my current markings so you can kind of see this more clearly, is that I have to get these rectangles. So I can see that these two purple ones have the exact same measurements. So I'm going to start there, still using base times height, and I can see that the base and height are 7 and 3, which is 21, but there are 2 of them, so a total area of 42. I'm going to do a little erasing again. And then you can see there's one rectangle there. And this is a little different because it has a kind of, you can see the 4, and then this 7 would transfer over there. So 4 times 7 is 28, and there's only one of those. So all of my circled values, so 70, 42, 28, and 28 all need to be added together. So 70 plus 42 plus 28 plus 28 give me a total surface area of 168 centimeters squared. Kind of funny, they both came out to be 168 with 2 totally different shapes. All right, so hopefully this is a little bit of a long video, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how to do some different types of prisms. But you definitely need to master finding the surface area of these rectangles and cubes back up at the top.